Good morning, everyone. Last week we regrouped, got done with Monopoly, hopefully got used to our online learning format, seeing me in two dimensions and meeting each other in Zoom rooms. So you should have some sort of schedule built. You know how to get your work done. Hopefully everything is kind of finding some new normalcy. It's kind of interesting since we're talking about new normalcy. This will be just a side note before we get into class. There used to be a famous rapper named Biggie Smalls, and he used to say, "Mo money, mo problems." And it was an interesting line because at the same time there had been a study done about lottery winners. And lottery winners typically found great happiness when they won the lottery. And these lottery winners, it wasn't just huge lottery winners. Some of them were smaller lotteries, $50,000, but nonetheless, they were winning more than a few $100s. And what the study showed was that over time, so at some point there was a treatment early on in time where the person's happiness spiked because they had a whole bunch of money and all of their problems that they thought money would make go away probably did. But then, as they got further and further away from the event, their happiness level returned to normal. And as Biggie said, mo money, mo problems, I think explains what's happening to lottery winners. Now, for us, I think that your happiness and your satisfaction is something that's kind of ingrained. It's something that we can work on. We can remind ourselves that we have good things to think about. I grilled last night, had fantastic hamburgers. So let's enjoy little things now that maybe we are feeling a little bit socially isolated. Reach out in other ways. Find your level of happiness. See if you can be thankful for some of those things, like really good grilled hamburgers. Anyway, let's move on and talk about Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is a big chapter. If we leak into next week, so be it. Today we're going to try to cover the first part of Chapter 9, which is monopolistic competition. So if we remind ourselves, we had perfect competition, where we had, which was our most competitive. And remind yourself of those qualities: many buyers and sellers, homogeneous product, free entry and exit, no trade secrets, zero economic profit in the long run, price takers. Basically, you're this little part of the market that has no influence over anything else. So the only way that firms in monopolistic competition can get ahead is by being great managers. And you can see evidence of that in farming and ranching. Those that are good managers probably make the most money. They're being compensated for their management skill. And then we had monopoly, which was our least competitive. We found, both qualitatively thinking through examples of monopoly, but also quantitatively looking at how monopolists can manipulate a market by restricting output and propping up prices. But it's hard to think about true monopolies, like the De Beers Diamond monopoly is a good one. Long distance telephone services 30, 40 years ago was a good example. But now we really just have examples. We do have monopoly, but we have market power and monopoly power, and there's some extent or there's some limitation to where that monopoly power ends. And so there could be some confusion about firms that have monopoly power and truly are monopoly, and firms that just have some market power and what that might be. And those firms are in a market structure called monopolistic competition. So, as you might imagine, there's some qualities of competition and there's some qualities of monopoly. Now, the main difference between monopolistic competition and monopoly is the market power that's enjoyed by monopolists is lasting. Those barriers to entry are real. Now, that doesn't mean that demand for their market might fizzle up and die and the market goes away, but there's a barrier to entry from other firms coming into their market and taking away their market power. In a monopolistically competitive market, that's not the case. A firm might have market power, but other firms can come in. So while they might look the same from an economic analysis, firms in monopolistically competitive markets with market power are going to face competition, and that will have ramifications on their market power, and you can probably guess what that may be. So let's first talk about the main feature of monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition and oligopoly in the next video have one defining trait. They're different than each other. I'll clear that up. For a monopolistically competitive firm, the trait is product differentiation. Ran out of marker board, sorry. Product differentiation is the idea or the opposite of homogeneous products or the opposite of identical products. It is that their products are not the same. You might ask, well, what makes them not the same? And it could be anything. What makes the product different is not necessarily about the actual product, the product is different in the consumer's mind. So these don't have to be substantial differences from one product to the next. The consumer just has to think that it is different. Now I want you to do an activity. It's a little bit weird, but you can do it at home. I want you to close your eyes and think about where I'm describing. So you've closed your eyes. It's lunchtime, and you and your friends have driven to a restaurant. And the restaurant doesn't have its name anywhere. Instead, you're looking at the features of the restaurant. You walk into the restaurant. Even before you walked in, there were some posters in the windows that may have been displaying a new special or a new sandwich or a deal or a sale. It might even been some sort of promotional poster about a kids movie for kids meals that were somehow having some product placement. Nonetheless, you walk in and you don't sit down. You order first. And the way that you order is you look at a big menu board. And 20, 30, 40 years ago, there would have been prices and it would have been a physical board. But now it's probably, at the very least, lots of graphics, or it might be LCD screens that have graphics and sandwiches and different ways that you can order. And those ways that you can order are as follows. You can either order a meal put together for you, an entree, a side, and a drink for one package price. Or you can buy smaller versions of those entrees, sides, and drinks a la carte, meaning one at a time. And usually that menu is over on the side somewhere, and it's less expensive than the main menu. Now you might ask, well, what are these entrees, sides, and drinks? I'm glad you asked. The entrees are made up of some sort of sandwich, some sort of carbohydrate package. So carbohydrate, protein, sometimes there will be fresh vegetables, sometimes there will be a slice of cheese or dairy product and some other condiments and another layer of carbohydrates. The side will almost certainly be a potato that has been cut up, fried, and seasoned, and the drink will be a soft drink, perhaps tea or sweet tea. You are served before you sit down, most likely. In the meantime, while you're waiting, you can go over to the condiment bar where there will most likely be ketchup or some other tomato-based sauce. If you're lucky, there might be mustard or barbecue sauce. And there will also be a drink station where you fill your own soft drinks. You eat. There's no utensils. Well, there might be utensils, but there certainly are no plates. And when you're done, you clean up your mess, you throw it away, and you leave. Now the question is, where am I describing? And I think I'll leave that to our groups. Now I guess I have to talk about it today. But we'll probably talk about this in groups as well. What did you think? Where are we right now? McDonald's might come to mind to begin with, but think about the other places that it could be. Certainly could be Burger King. It certainly could be Arby's. Could it be anywhere else? So let's talk about that this afternoon in our small groups. The point is, we think that Arby's, Burger King, McDonald's are very, very different. But are they? Are they really that much different? And I would say that they're not. And the evidence that I have to show going back that they are different is the fact that when we try to decide where to eat, sometimes it is very, very difficult to determine, do I want to eat at Popeyes or do I want to eat at Burger King? Or do I want to eat at Arby's or do I want to eat at Qdoba? These places, it becomes, in my family, I could ask my wife to come in here. What's one of our top 5 arguments? Where are we going to go out to eat? Which is probably why we're happier now, because we don't have to decide that. So the products only have to be differentiated in the minds of the consumers. Now let me give you a few other examples of ways that products are differentiated that might seem to be less substantial than you may have thought to begin with. If I asked you what is the general shape of a Doritos potato chip, you might say a triangle. But indeed it is not a triangle. It is a shape that is a close cousin of the triangle. Oops. It's a triangle with rounded corners. Now no, the Frito-Lay company is not employing 4-year-olds who are taking chips and grinding off the corners. They have a special process whereby they round the corners of their chips. And that's one of the ways that a Dorito is differentiated from other nacho cheese or other flavored tortilla chips. And you might say, well, why is that something that matters? I can only come up with 2 reasons why you would want a rounded corner chip instead of a normal triangle. Number 1, the rounded corners might not break off as much in the bag, and you end up with fewer chip shards that you have to do one of these to eat. And number 2, if you have a small mouth, maybe those rounded corners don't leave you with bleeding corners of your mouth. Nonetheless, you have to admit it's a pretty small difference. The second way, or the second item that I want you to think about is ibuprofen, or known by its brand name of Advil. How is Advil different than ibuprofen? Now, back in my younger years, when I played tennis in college, whenever anything hurt, the athletic trainer would give you ibuprofen. That was it. It was kind of the Robitussin of our athletic training staff. If something hurts, ibuprofen, here you go. And they always gave us ibuprofen, never Advil. And I had a friend who would not take the ibuprofen. He would go to Walmart and he would buy Advil instead, and he would take that. I'd say, Chris, you are wasting your money because Advil is nothing more than ibuprofen. If you look at the active ingredients, ibuprofen is 200 milligrams. Advil is 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. It's exactly the same thing. But in his mind, the Advil made his elbow or shoulder hurt less than the ibuprofen. Likewise, Tylenol is nothing more than a drug called acetaminophen. And Aleve is nothing more than a drug called naproxen sodium. These are just generic versions of the name brand drug. So then why is it if they are the same, someone would pay extra for Advil? The reason why someone might pay more money for Advil initially would be the coating of an Advil is candy. If you put Advil in your mouth and you suck on it for just a moment, it's sweet. It's candy coated like an M&M, whereas ibuprofen is not. It is just a tablet of drugs. Since then, there are other ways that these drugs have differentiated themselves. Easy open lids, rapid release, gel caps. But it doesn't change the fact that the way that the drug actually works is exactly the same as a generic 200 milligram tablet of ibuprofen. So products, they're not differentiated in meaningful ways oftentimes because there's really no way to differentiate ibuprofen. Ibuprofen is simply an anti-inflammatory pain reliever. There's not much you can do to change that. All right, I think that's good for today. I want to make sure that you've read, that you've watched this, and we should have good discussion this afternoon. I'll send an alert right now that there is some sort of lecture for you to watch, and hopefully things are still going well where you are. See you this afternoon.